Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you're able to make it here with me this evening for this presentation on ways that we can begin to enhance our immune system this fall so that we will set ourselves up as we enter into cold and flu season to be in the best state that we can for optimal health. Before we begin, I just wanted to say that, like if you were training for a race or studying for an exam, you would not start your study or your training the night before, right? You would start, months in advance to begin to set yourself up for success. That is a very similar approach that we are going to be taking today as we start to talk about different ways that we can begin to enhance and support our immune system function. Our body has an extraordinary built-in protective system that has the ability to fight off pathogens like bacteria and viruses, as long as we are living a life that supports and allows that system to be in balance and harmony. And so during this talk, what we will be covering is an overall background on your immune system and how it works. We'll be talking about the flu and COVID-19, and then some of the strategies and the habits that we can begin to develop right now, as I mentioned before, to begin enhancing our immune system through nutrition and supplements, sleep, movement and exercise, stress reduction, and acupuncture and Chinese herbs. This is in no way an exhaustive list. There are so many other things like essential oils and frequency medicine, but we are going to begin here tonight. And before I start, I just wanted to give credit to where it's due. A lot of the information that I'll be talking about this evening comes from one of my mentors and teachers, Dr. Heather Zwicky. Dr. Zwicky earned her PhD in immunology and microbiology from the University of Colorado Health Sciences with a focus on infectious disease. She went on to complete her postdoctorate and teach medical school at Yale University. She was my immunology professor at NUNM in Portland, Oregon, where she teaches and helped found the HealthGot Research Institute. She's currently a part of the Bridge program, which is an NIH-funded integrative health research project. And so a lot of the information, as I mentioned, that I'm using tonight has come from some of the podcasts and talks that she has given recently. All right, let's get started. So I want to start with this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes: "Your health is your wealth." This is probably the main mantra that I live by in my life. And I find this to be true on so many levels, right? Like, if our health is poor, we're going to feel emotionally not that great. Our relationships are going to suffer. Most likely our jobs or careers are going to suffer, which will have a financial impact. And so really, in my opinion, the greatest place that we can invest is our health, because in the long run, that's going to have the greatest return. It's going to give us the energy, the creativity, and the stamina to really, live our best life. All right. So before we get started, I want to talk about some of the key characters that we'll be discussing tonight in our immune system. Our immune system has an innate aspect to it and an adaptive aspect to it. The part that we're going to be talking about tonight is our adaptive immune system. And we'll be exploring our CD8 T cells. These are like the snipers of our immune system. They are patrolling our body, and they are locating and targeting and killing infected cells. And they also activate other immune cells. And these are the cells that can develop memory, meaning that the first time that they're exposed to a pathogen or virus, they're going to have to go through a whole process in order to develop that memory. But when they do that, the next time that they are exposed to that same pathogen or virus, they will be able to immediately respond and take it out. And the next character that we will talk about are macrophages. These actually create the fever response, and they help the CD8 T cells identify the virus. So they go around and they tag and engulf infected cells and begin to destroy them. And when they tag and engulf these cells, the CD8 T cells are now able to identify which cells have been infected and able to target and destroy it. And then the macrophages also release cytokines, which are signaling molecules that mediate and regulate immunity and inflammation. So I just wanted to lay the foundation, kind of get these things, percolating in the back of your mind as we go on, and we'll talk more about them in a moment. So let's start by talking about coronaviruses. Coronaviruses have been around for a really long time. They're one of the most common causes of flu-like symptoms or the common cold that we experience here in the US. The average coronavirus is like a mild cold. For most people who get COVID-19, their reaction to it is very similar to that of a mild cold. I say most people, not all people, which means that for most people, it's less pathogenic. However, the challenge is that it also is more infectious, than many other of coronaviruses that we've been exposed to. But let's put that in perspective, okay? So if you look at the measles, if you have one person who gets infected with the measles in a group of people, that one person can infect 18 other people. If you take one person who's infected with COVID-19 in a group of people, that person can infect 2 other people. So while it may be slightly more infectious, it is nowhere near as dangerous as something like the measles. COVID-19 is actually more in line with MERS, which we saw in 2012 in terms of severity. And the good news is that SARS and MERS have actually helped us to speed up the rate in which we've been able to come up with testing and therapies for COVID-19. So it's not that we're starting from nowhere with this. Even if there are some things that are novel or new about it, we do have some good information going in. We know that COVID is transmitted through respiratory droplets, which still makes washing your hands the most effective prevention. Washing your hands and not touching your face, along with covering your nose and mouth fully when you cough or sneeze. This does not mean sneezing into your elbow. I see that in a lot of places. When you sneeze into your elbow, all of those droplets are going to travel, a long way. It also doesn't mean sneezing into your hand, because then you're going to probably touch your face. What it means is, you could either carry a handkerchief or you can use your shirt, but pull it fully over your nose and mouth before you sneeze and cough. And then if you are in a place that is less ventilated and crowded, it can be helpful to have a face covering, but mostly the most important thing is that if you're sick, stay home, because we do know that this virus can be transmitted pretty easily. We also know that COVID-19 is affecting people with pre-existing conditions more severely, so protecting vulnerable populations is also important. And moving on to this next slide, I want to try to not go to the other slide, but show you. Do you see these little spike proteins on the virus right here? Those spike proteins are what make COVID very specific for the lower part of the lungs and why it's causing pneumonia in some people. The other thing that's unique about COVID is that it targets different receptors in the body than other viruses do, specifically the ACE2 receptors, which are found in your lungs, your gut, and your brain, which is why the symptom presentation is so diverse for people. The other thing that we are finding out through research is that people who are obese or who have diabetes actually are going to have more of these ACE2 receptors available, which is also why they tend to have more severe symptoms and less positive outcomes. Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about these spike proteins again, okay? So if a virus mutates, it'll change its spike proteins. What we have been finding when we've done PCR testing for COVID And what that means in PCR testing is that we're identifying the spike protein. We only see one specific protein, which means that the virus doesn't seem to be mutating a lot. If this continues down the road, it suggests that we have a very good chance of acquiring immunity towards it once we've been exposed. And I'll touch on this in a little bit. To put this into context, this flu season, the CDC estimates that there'll be 1,200 different flu viruses that'll be circulating in the US. And before we move on from this slide, I just wanted to mention, like as we go into cold and flu season, in my opinion, it's not a matter of if we will be exposed to somebody who has the flu or who has COVID-19, but when we will. And one thing that's important to know when you're trying to distinguish between, is what you're experiencing the flu or is it COVID-19, is that if it's the flu, generally you're going to develop symptoms very quickly after exposure, probably within 48 hours. And that's because your body has been exposed to thousands of different flu strains throughout your lifetime, and it has acquired an immune response that's able to be very quick and effective. With COVID-19, we have not been exposed to this virus for that long. Some people say, it started back in November of last year. And so our body is still learning how to respond. So those symptoms after exposure will generally take somewhere between 2 and 11 days. And that can be an initial way of, kind of feeling out what it is. And then if you feel like it, you could get additional testing to confirm that. All right. So let's talk about our immune system. Our immune system is our safety system. It's always scanning the environment and asking if something is dangerous or safe. And it recognizes if an organism or pathogen is dangerous by its spike protein, what we talked about a minute ago. From here, the whole immune process starts with inflammation. So let's go through that right now quickly. So our immune system responds first with inflammation. This is what brings in all the cells of our immune system to go fight a pathogen or a virus. And what happens is that the macrophages, they kick this off by triggering the fever response. They also go around engulfing infected cells and tagging them so that they can be identified by our body's sniper cells, which are also called CD8 T cells. These sniper cells are now able to identify the virus and kill all infected cells. And these macrophages also release cytokines, which are cell signaling molecules that aid cell-to-cell communication in an immune response and stimulate the movement of cells towards sites of inflammation, infection, and trauma. With most infection, the release of cytokines is controlled in order to maintain a balance between killing the virus and minimizing damage to healthy cells. Sometimes this can go haywire, and that is called a cytokine storm. So all of the infected cells have been destroyed now, and the body has to clear all of the dead cells and inflammation out, and that's called resolving inflammation. Once we've done this, we get to the memory stage of an infection, which is what allows our sniper or CD8 T cells to create memory of that specific pathogen. That means that now when the body's exposed to that pathogen again down the line, these CD8 T cells, which are monitoring for threat, can respond immediately and destroy the threat without having to initiate the whole process that we just went through. So I say this because I want it to help people begin to feel empowered that, like say that you are exposed and you do get, COVID. The first time you get it, it may take a full 14 days for you to mount a response and to resolve that. But the next time that you're exposed, that will be reduced maybe because you've started to acquire memory. So maybe it'll take you 4 or 5 days until finally you'll create a response that's much like the 24-hour flu. And your immune system at this point has developed that adaptive immunity and is able to respond quickly. All right, so that shows you the superstars of your immune system. And just to sort of summarize that one more time, we need to go through all of these phases. First, we have to identify the threat. We have to increase inflammation. We have to fight the infection. We have to resolve the inflammation. And we have to create memory. One of the reasons that we're struggling a lot in this country in the United States is because we're coming into problems in this area of inflammation, because so many people already suffer from chronic inflammation. It's negatively impacting those processes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So what we have found is that if your nutritional state is compromised, you're going to have more inflammation and a less healthy response to the virus, especially if you're deficient in vitamins A, D, and C. So our primary exposure to pathogens is through our mouth. 80% of our immune system is actually located in our gut, which means that everything that you eat impacts your immune system. I really want to repeat that and emphasize that. Everything that you eat impacts your immune system. This actually gives us a lot of power. We know that the gut is where health begins, and it's also home to a huge microbiome made of innumerable species of bacteria. And so let's go here and talk a little bit about how do we feed those good bacteria in our gut. One of the best, most important ways is through eating prebiotic foods. These are foods that have very dense fiber. They provide our good gut bacteria with long-term sources of nourishment. These are those long strings and dense fibers. They are found in foods like onions, leeks, artichokes, asparagus, sunchokes, and bananas. And then we also, once we have that established, I cannot emphasize that enough. It's more important than anything else because that's the food that those good gut bacteria really, really like. We want to make sure that we're getting enough fruits and vegetables. So the amount and variety is really important here. We want to aim for a minimum of 30 servings a week. That might sound like a lot, but it really only breaks down to about 4 or 5 a day. And that can be fruits and vegetables. And we want to focus on options that are high in the vitamins that I mentioned, A, C, D, and also zinc. Some foods that are high in those things are things like spinach, kale, oranges, kiwi, tomatoes, oysters, nuts, whole grains, fatty fish, and eggs. And before we move on here, I want to talk a little bit more about vitamin A and its role in our gut. Vitamin A is key to the gut making the right decisions for us. This is because vitamin A has a profound effect on the gut mucosal immune system. It is critical to a very sophisticated bidirectional mechanism that takes place in the digestive system and leads to immune tolerance across the entire gut lining. Immune tolerance is the essence of good health. An intolerant immune system will lead to a wide variety of illnesses, and the gut is where many people first lose immune tolerance, which is why everything that we put into our mouth affects our gut. Vitamin A cannot be synthesized by the human body. It must be absorbed by the intestines from the diet. The cells along the vast mucosal surfaces of your body are constantly in contact with food, microbes, and toxins. They make innumerable immunological decisions every day, so many that in a single day's encounter, they exceed that of the rest of your immune system over your entire lifetime. As the gut makes its decisions, it then relays information from the innate to the adaptive immune system, and mucosal tolerance is a necessity for us to survive. Without it, we could not survive one single day. So there are preformed sources of vitamin A found in animal products like meat, fish, and dairy, and there are proformed sources found in leafy green vegetables, orange and yellow vegetables, tomato products, and fruits like cantaloupe and mango. So besides making sure that we're feeding our gut buddies with all of these good foods, we want to make sure that we avoid some of the foods that really agitate the bad gut bacteria that we have. And those are things like artificial sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, refined sugars, processed foods, GMOs, and basically anything that you indulge in excess. I want to touch on GMOs here because GMOs reduce nutrient density and can also cause your pathogenic bacteria to act up. So look for heritage or organic non-GMO produce as much as you can. Alrighty. So now let's get into some of these key nutrients that are really essential for immune function. And let's start with vitamin C. Everybody is familiar with vitamin C, I think, in your immune system. But I wanted to touch on some clinical trials that have found that vitamin C can shorten the frequency, duration, and severity of a common cold. and the incidences of pneumonia, and that typical daily doses of vitamin C range from 500 to 3,000 milligrams daily, with even higher doses when you are using them in the face of an infection, an acute infection. One thing that you should know about vitamin C is that it is water soluble, so you can't overdose on it. However, if you have kidney disease, you should not take vitamin C. Some studies have shown that you can take doses as high as 6 to 8 grams when you are sick. But like I said, be careful if you have kidney disease. The other thing is that, if you take too much vitamin C, it can give you an upset stomach. Sometimes it can give you the runs. But most of the time you're just going to pee it out. So don't waste your money. Generally, 3,000 milligrams, even when you're sick, is probably enough. Especially if you're eating the foods that are really high in vitamin C, like kiwi. Kiwi has more vitamin C than an orange. Things like broccoli, spinach, and tomatoes as well. So now let's talk about vitamin D. Vitamin D has a significant role in the regulation of the human immune system and may reduce the risk of certain viral and bacterial infections by modulating immune response to these pathogens. One thing that I think is startling is that 95% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. Our vitamin D receptors determine how much vitamin D makes it into our cells. So even if you have a lot of sun exposure, you could still be vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, so you can take too much. You need to be careful, but you want your vitamin D blood range to be between 50 and 80 for optimal immune function. You may want to order labs to check your levels and consult with your medical professional on proper dosing. But I also wanted to touch on this study that was done that demonstrated that low levels of plasma vitamin D could increase the incidence or severity of respiratory viral infections in humans, suggesting an important potential role for this vitamin in the prevention or treatment of viral respiratory tract infections. And some good food sources for vitamin D are things like salmon, mushrooms, egg yolks, beef liver, cheese, and many, many other things. And so then let's talk about zinc. Zinc is especially important for this particular coronavirus. Appears to be susceptible to the viral inhibitory actions of zinc. Zinc may prevent corona entry into cells and it appears to reduce the virulence of coronavirus. Typical daily dosing of zinc is between 15 and 30 milligrams a day. And some of the great food things that have zinc in them are things like oysters, beef, beans, nuts, and yogurts. I would definitely recommend, in addition to trying to eat as many of these types of food, that you do supplement with these through cold and flu season. And then moving on to herbs. Before we talk about herbs, I want to mention that there can be herb-drug interactions for many herbs. So if you're on medications, please consult with your physician before taking any herb, just to ensure that it will be safe. Let's start by talking about echinacea. Echinacea is best known for its beneficial effects on our immune system. There are many studies that have found that this plant may help your immune system combat infections and viruses and can help you recover faster from an illness. I love echinacea because it's great for immune, because of its adaptogenic properties. It's so good for immune enhancement. It can be used if somebody has a deficient immune system to enhance it, and it can be used if somebody has an exaggerated immune response to help calm that down. And so it's really a pretty great herb for almost everybody. It also has great anti-inflammatory components to it. The thing about echinacea, though, is that you don't want to take it for more than 10 days consecutively. So what you do is you want to cycle on and off of it. And then next, we'll talk about elderberry. Elderberries are thought to prevent or shorten the duration of colds and flus. They reduce upper respiratory infections and decrease pain and inflammation. There's been some evidence that shows that elderberry can inhibit replication and viral attachment of human coronaviruses, not COVID-19, but it's still a member of the same coronavirus family. And so Elderberry is most effective in the prevention or early stages of coronavirus infections. So this is something that you can take similarly to echinacea. You know, it's something that I would also cycle on and off of. And then I want to talk about passion flower. Passion flower is amazing because not only is it going to have some great immune enhancing properties, but it also is really anti-inflammatory and it helps to calm your nerves and nervous system. So it's great for anxiety and it'll help with sleep, which we'll touch upon a little bit later on. Let's continue on from here. So wrapping up nutrition, I just want to touch on the importance of lowering inflammation in your body overall. It's important to avoid things that trigger inflammation, like we talked about, like sugar and stress. We want to start by keeping inflammation down as much as possible. So, but what's important here is that a little inflammatory response is good, as that means that the immune system is working. So we don't want to suppress it completely, but we also don't want it to go haywire. So some things that we can take and use on a regular basis to help reduce inflammation in our body are things like lemon balm, nettle, spirulina, turmeric, ginseng, ginkgo, Melissa officinalis, which is a part of the mint family, and passion flower. I would recommend probably everybody get passion flower because it works on so many different systems. All right, so now let's talk about the importance of sleep and immune health. It's been found that disrupted sleep cycles in those who don't sleep through the night or get less than 5 hours of sleep a night tend to have higher levels of inflammation and worse infections. So what can we do? We can begin to practice good sleep hygiene. Well, that starts first with making sure that we get enough sleep a night. So we want to aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And I would say probably the most important thing that will lead into later on when we talk about natural sleep cycles is that we want to create a regular sleep schedule. Our body's hormones are based upon our circadian rhythms. And so we want to support those rhythms as much as possible. And then if you are somebody who has a hard time unwinding at night or falling asleep, taking a hot shower before you go to bed can be really helpful. Also, turning off your electronics. Your electronics emit a blue light that disrupts your body's natural hormones. And so if you are going to use your electronics or watch TV before you go to bed, you could invest in some blue light blocking glasses that could help with that. But I would recommend just trying to have some space between the use of your electronics and when you go to bed. Some other things that can be helpful is to drink some hot tea. You could drink some nice passion flower tea. Keep your room nice, cool, and dark. And then another thing, if your mind tends to race a lot at night, doing a little bit of meditation or conscious breath work before you go to bed can help to calm that down. Before we move on from the slide, I just wanted to mention how our natural sleep cycles work. So melatonin is a hormone that is released in the evening that actually helps us to fall asleep. And GABA is a relaxation hormone that helps us to sleep through the night. And then cortisol is the hormone that's released in the early morning hours as we wake up, and it helps us to get up and going for the day. All right, let's talk about melatonin. There's some cool research that's been done around melatonin and your immune function. So I wanted to touch on that before we get into the sleep component. So like I said, melatonin's involvement with immune function is being studied, but research has shown that its binding to immune governing cells called T helper cells can trigger a cascade of events leading to an enhanced immune responsiveness. In addition, melatonin administration can increase the production of antibodies. In some instances, melatonin can also act as an anti-inflammatory mediator and thus may be preventative or supportive for cytokine storms. And because age-related impairment of immune system usually begins to occur around age 60 and coincides with decreased melatonin concentrations, melatonin may be beneficial among seniors. So like I mentioned before, one of the greatest ways that you can support your body's natural melatonin production is through returning to a regular sleep-wake cycle. And then the thing that we want to realize is that It's best to balance and restore your melatonin levels naturally through food and herbs, and some great foods that contain tryptophan, which actually promotes the melatonin and sleep response, are things like turkey, eggs, fish, yogurt, leafy greens, soybeans, and pumpkin seeds. Also, valerian is an herb that will trigger your body to produce its own melatonin. It actually has quite sedative properties. It's really powerful. It contains antioxidants hesperidin and linearin, which appear to have sedative and sleep enhancing properties. So then moving on from melatonin, let's talk about that hormone, that relaxation hormone that helps us sleep through the night, GABA. What we know is that meditation and yoga promote GABA production. But the other amazing thing, feeding off of our conversation before about the importance of gut health, not only is gut health imperative for our immune system, but also for our nervous system. And we will find in another talk, not tonight, that our gut is really important for our mental and emotional well-being as well. So probiotics will help us to synthesize GABA naturally. So we want to consider foods such as fermented pickles, sauerkrauts, kimchi, plain kefir, and coconut water kefir. And you can also consider taking a multi-strain probiotic. All right. And then, passion flower. Passion flower will trigger your body to produce GABA. And there was a trial that was done that showed that those who had a daily dose of herbal tea with passion flower reported improvement in the quality of their sleep. All right, let's move on to movement and exercise. So we know that moving our body every day is important for immune health. Some theories about how that works is that exercise causes changes in antibodies and white blood cells that help the body's immune system fight disease. We also know that exercise slows down the release of stress hormones. Some stress increases the chance of illness. So lower stress hormones may prevent against illness. Everybody is starting from somewhere. So some people may, be athletes that, already are moving their body consistently every day. And some people, maybe their only movement is, around their house. So what I want to emphasize is that we all have to start somewhere, and you start where you're at. So maybe that's just 5 minutes a day, but what's most important is to start with an activity that you enjoy. And in my opinion, if you can do that outside and spend time in nature, that's even better. So why is exercise so important? From a Chinese medicine perspective, when our blood and our qi are not moving smoothly throughout our whole system, when they get impaired or blocked, that is what creates pain, imbalance, and inflammation in the body. So exercise really helps to promote that flow. I thought that this was really profound. A study found that 3 days in a row with under 5,000 steps a day increased insulin resistance, even in people who were fit. That just shows that it is recommended and so important that we move our body a little bit every single day. It's recommended that we get at least 30 minutes of moderate exercise a day. So some examples of this could be brisk walking, bicycling, dancing, canoeing, tennis, and more. The other thing that's awesome about movement and exercise is not only does it benefit your physical health, but it also benefits your mental health. So if you're somebody who, really struggles to get as much movement in your day as you would like, I came up with this list of suggestions that you can start doing. So you could take the stairs every chance that you get. You could take a short 15-minute walk on your lunch break, and then maybe a short 15-minute walk after dinner. You could park far away from your office or the grocery store so that you have to walk further to the door. You could spend 5 minutes stretching right when you wake up first thing in the morning. If you have a sport that you love, you could consider joining a recreational league. You'll move more and you'll make friends. You could walk or jog your dog around the block. You could create a friendly competition with friends or coworkers to see who can get the most steps in a week. And then these two are things that I personally do in my life is if you're watching TV at night, you could, lift some weights, or you could walk on a treadmill while you're watching TV. And then here's the thing is that many of us will say, my life is too busy. I don't have enough time, to exercise. What I have found is that if you enter your exercise into your schedule and set a little bit of time aside each week before the week starts, you will get it in, but you have to block it off. And then the last one is to get an exercise and accountability buddy, and check in with each other, like each day or, a couple times a week, just to, inspire and motivate one another. And then stress management. So what we have found, the research, it's really crazy, but it has shown that high stress impacts not only your immune system, but the immune system of your offspring. That stress is transferred in the DNA to your offspring. So one of the things that my mentor, Dr. Zwicky, said that I really thought was spot on and helpful is that stress is the perception of threat and that we won't be able to cope with it. Again, I want to emphasize some words. Stress is the perception of threat and that we won't be able to cope with it. And because of that, that means that we always have the power and the ability to change our perception in the way that we look at things. And one thing that I really highly recommend for everybody as the first step in helping to change that perception is to limit your exposure to things that cause you to feel stress and anxiety, which means if the news is causing you to feel stress and anxiety, turn it off. If being on social media makes you feel angry and frustrated or hopeless, stop, disconnect, don't go there. Start to limit your exposure to those things that cause you to feel uneasy or stressed out. And then my two favorite approaches to working with stress are breath awareness. Our breath is the greatest gift and resource that we've been given. It comes and goes without our conscious thought and has the power to change our state in a matter of moments. We can spend our entire day without even noticing our breath. And when we get stressed out, often our breath becomes shallow, and this can lead to feelings of anxiety and overwhelm. So learning to pay attention to and work with our breath is one of the greatest habits that you can develop. So I wanted to take just a quick moment here and teach you a breathing technique called square breathing. And this is something that you can practice throughout your day. We're going to do 3 breaths together. And basically how it works is that we'll breathe into the count of 4, we'll pause to the count of 4, we'll exhale to the count of 4, and then we'll hold that exhale to the count of 4. And we can do that now just at your own breath rate. And just check in to how you feel after having just taken 3 conscious breaths, and just notice the power of that simple thing to just create a little bit more space. Maybe your body feels a little bit more relaxed. Maybe you feel more grounded. That type of breathing is one of the most powerful ways that we can take our body out of fight or flight or sympathetic overdrive. And it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. Meditation. Research suggests that meditation may actually physically change your brain and body and could potentially help to improve many health problems. I want to just point out some of the main ones that we're talking about right now, which are reduced stress, lowered anxiety, increased immune function, and increased emotional well-being. And the thing about meditation is that it doesn't have to be some drawn out long ordeal. It could be something as simple as just taking 5 minutes every day to sit and pay attention to your breath. The research has actually shown that consistent and regular meditation has more benefit than just sporadically sitting for, 20 minutes here or an hour here. So just consider starting slowly and simply. And I also offer an 8-week online meditation course. And so if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me. And then finally, acupuncture and herbs. So acupuncture, of course, is one of my favorite things. And it's great for immune function because it helps to reduce overall inflammation via its action on the vagus nerve. It also stimulates the flow of qi and blood throughout the body, which we know is what promotes the flow of our immune cells to the areas that they need to go. And it also actually can stimulate cytokines and other immune cells in the body. And then Chinese herbs have been used for thousands of years in China, where they've helped the body both prevent and fight disease. There are herbal formulas and protocols that can be used to protect your body from getting sick and to help your body fight infection and recover if you do get sick. And then finally, probably the central tenet of Chinese medicine, the heart of it is this notion of living in harmony with nature. Our bodies move and function in cycles and seasons that we see reflected in nature. It's important to begin to understand and live in harmony with these. An example of this are things like, eating according to the seasons, working with our natural sleep-wake cycles and more. In Chinese medicine, this relationship with nature or living in harmony with that is called Wu Wei, which means no action and facilitates harmony, acceptance, and fluidity. It reminds us to not grasp onto anything, as it is through grasping and lack of acceptance for what is that we suffer. And then finally, this is some of the resources that I used for this presentation. Like I mentioned before, if you'd like a copy of this presentation to use as a resource for yourself to check out these resources more deeply, I highly recommend it. The podcasts by Dr. Zwicky are really amazing. She has an incredible way of taking complex things and making them very easy to understand and enjoyable. And then finally, this is a moment that I'd like to leave open for questions. If anybody has any questions, please, you can turn on your mic. Otherwise, if not, I thank you very much for being here. And I hope that this has helped you to feel more empowered and like you really can do so much to keep yourself and your family healthy this season. And if you would like any additional support, please reach out to me. Thank you.